So here we are with Game of Kings by Dorothy Dunnett, and we are at part 2, chapter 2, Discovered Check. This chapter was so scary because Lymond was pissed off. It was so great. Okay, let's start from the beginning though. We start with, there's been multiple allusions to this, Richard just not hanging out with Mariotta. Is it because he is genuinely just not interested in socializing with a woman who is probably 10 plus years his junior, 15 years his junior, I'm assuming? Is it because he isn't interested in members of the opposite sex, like sexually? Or is it, and I kind of hope this is the correct reason, is that he doesn't like the idea of getting her pregnant because if he has a child, that child is something that Lymond could harm because that child is now standing also between him and power. So that was on page 189. We go to page 190. There was a lot of jumping around here. Like some sections in this book, there's just a whole bunch of exposition and we just jump from boom, boom, boom around and you're like, okay, well, yeah, all right, we're on the other side of the country. Oh, we're back again, that's fine. And then we get a little bit of Mariotta's POV. And I just really appreciate how Dunnett just does a deep dive into the psychology of a person, just so deep that even though we only get like a page or two every now and then of different characters, it really is getting out the nuts and bolts. So we've got here page 190. Oh, so Mariotta is basically comparing Lymond to Richard in her head after receiving these jewels from her secret admirer, which must be Lymond. I'm surprised that she didn't get sent red jewels after that comment of Lymond making to Mariotta when they first met, saying, I should see you in red. But I think it was just gold that got sent. Maybe red would have been too obvious. Or rubies are hard to find. So she says, thinks to herself, it's monstrous to compare the two men. A well-balanced, mature woman of 19 would unpin the ring brooch from inside her bodice, put it in and the bracelet in Richard's hands and say, your brother is playing court to me. What do I do? Oh my God. I'm glad she didn't do that because Mariotta's whole story here is that she's just on the outside the wife of Richard, and on the inside she fancies herself as the lover of Lymond. I mean, we understand you. We do. And then she does, oh, sorry about the darkness here. The sun will come back out. Then she just goes on and wears all these jewels, kind of hoping someone will pick up on these so that she can then say, oh, it's from this person, why didn't you ask before? She's kind of self-sabotaging by wearing these and kind of getting annoyed when people don't pick up that, hey, where did you get that from? It's immature, really, is what we're getting at here. So we definitely see the immature side of Mariotta. And now that we know she's 19, I don't know if I really blame her too much for this activity, but it is definitely some immaturity. Then we get this letter from John Maxwell, which is fascinating. I do wonder if John actually knows if these are getting sent to Agnes or if this is just Lymond using his name. We don't know. Obviously they had that discussion in the Ostrich Inn about a whole bunch of stuff that we're not privy to because it kind of wasn't in the actual book, but we know that they were talking for a long time. So this is clearly part of Lymond's plan, is to use John Maxwell's name, maybe get him to form a connection with Agnes, but it is also his plan just to be able to communicate with Christian. Why? I don't know. I think this is a combination of Lymond liking Christian, but also I think that he can use her because he uses all of his network. It also makes me wonder if Lymond is going to kill John Maxwell because John Maxwell now knows a lot about Lymond. And I don't know if Lymond's going to like that. So I wonder if he's thinking that Maxwell is dispensable in the future, which would then solve the problem of the potential romance between Maxwell and Agnes. So we'll see. It's so hard to know. Lymond's actions are so enigmatic. And they have to be, because if we didn't think that there was an iceberg underneath who the hell is Lymond, we wouldn't keep reading, but it's just so hard to guess. Once again on page 194, we get The Dowager, who had excellent control of her facial muscles. Is she the ultimate actor? Right, then this chapter was very exciting, mainly because of Lymond getting pissed. And then we have this whole thing of the English marching north, page 199. I don't quite understand exactly the mechanics of all this. It was all a bit, because we've got them marching north, there's a whole bunch of cattle and animals, they can't go any further, then the Scottish jump on them, but we know that the cattle's there because of Lymond, because we know that he's stolen the cattle, which, by the way, was a bit weird, because when the cattle was stolen from the Somerville's place, wouldn't they have suspected that it was Lymond? Or at least Will Scott, because they were trying to get Will Scott. It just seems very unusual that they didn't, that was not suspected, because they knew that he, well, at least Gideon would have known that he broke into Lord Grey's house under the disguise of a supply carriage and came in. So it just seems that a bit weird that they don't suspect that there's something fishy about all of that going missing when they're expecting something bad to happen to themselves. This battle obviously went into the Scottish favour, so did Lymond want that to happen? I mean, my ultimate theory is that Lymond's trying to stop this war and reduce casualties between England and Scotland. That's seems like the obvious thing to me. I'm not convinced that's entirely true, but this particular battle was entirely went to the Scottish favour, so I don't know what to make of that. And oh my gosh, 2 important meetings. We've got Will Scott meeting with his father and them having a little exchange, and Will actually agreeing to meet with his father. What? This is exactly not what Will said he was gonna do. You know, he was sticking to his philosophy and being a crime for the sake of crime and the purity of crime, then agrees to meet his father. And the way that it's written, this is page 201, makes me think that Will is actually genuinely conflicted when he sees his father. I don't think it's him trying to meet his father to pull the wool over his eyes. Good pun for the chapter. So I'm very excited for that meeting, because I know, I can feel it, that he's going to have this meeting with his father and Lymond's going to find out about it, and Lymond is going to be so angry. And then the other meeting is that Richard sees Lymond and has a chance to shoot him. Buccleuch gets in the way, and on purpose? Who knows? We don't know. Maybe? On purpose or not, Richard is next time that happens, I'm gonna shoot. Richard is really angry. And considering we know what Lymond does when he's angry later in this chapter, Richard he's gonna crack. He's gonna crack. There is some anger in this family. Definitely. Yeah, page 202. Next time, regardless of what is in the way, I shoot. And I shoot is in italics. And there are very rarely italics in this book. Very rarely. So Richard was definitely annoyed. Definitely Sir Watts, or Buccleuch's response is, he's just kind of annoyed at Richard at this point, because he's saying, I want to get my son back, so the worst case scenario, he can be tried and hanged. I'd rather that than him continue being an outlaw, which is a bit horrible, really. Not convinced that's true, I think. I think Buccleuch actually just wants to save Will regardless. But anyway, that's what he said. We go on to the scene soon. So we go on to this scene where they're returning the cattle now to the Somerville's house, and Kate and her daughter Philippa hear the piano playing, and it seems really almost too good to be her husband, because she makes a comment on page 203, then it's father with 4 hands. And of course we know that it's Lymond, because of course Lymond plays the piano. He can do everything, apparently. Although to the point that as they come in, he keeps playing the piano and kind of ignores them until he finishes the song, which was a bit cold but hilarious. Exactly what Lymond would do. He also completely gaslights them, because he says, there are some rough men of mine in every passage out there. You will both be safer with me. Shut the door. In order for them to keep them in. But we're all thinking, well, no, I'm pretty sure his men wouldn't kill Philippa and Kate because they would have been instructed by Lymond, hey, if you see like a daughter and a wife, can you please bring them here? Like, I don't think that would have happened. Anyway, his gaslighting skills are like 10 out of 10. So basically Lymond is an absolute cock this entire scene. He is just done. He is annoyed. I'm assuming that he's been riding all night to get these cattle back after the battle. Maybe they stopped, I don't know. And he just gets the letter from Kate and then literally shows them the door. It's like, get out now. You're here. I've got everything I need. This is page 204. Your company enthralls me, but I believe I can dispense with it. Get out, please. What? It's just so mean. He's so mean. Oh my goodness. Anyway, they don't go because Gideon comes in and then Lymond gets even more pissed off and he really wants them to know his name. He told them his name. So there you go. He said, my name is Lymond. Well, why does Gideon Somerville not know about Lymond? So I thought, this is a bit of a shock to me because I just assumed that Lymond was more infamous than what I thought. I thought maybe he would have been kind of a well-known name among not just Scotland, but also England, or at least people in England of import or have been involved with the court, which Somerville has. And he didn't know Lymond's name, so there you go, that's interesting. I still can't get over, your company enthralls me. Get out. I was biting my nails in the scene 205, 206 of Lymond interacting with the little kid, the little girl. That was just hair raising. I just thought he's not going to hurt a child because if he hurts a child in front of readers, he's going to be a lot harder to deal with. But he didn't hurt her, but he wasn't exactly nice to the child. There was a funny moment at the bottom of page 206 where Kate's just sitting back whilst this is happening and notices his wrists and his hands, Lymond's wrists and hands. Kate thought, he has exquisite wrists and hands. What an unspeakably foul thing to do to a child. In the middle of her lamenting about this poor thing happening to her daughter, she's focusing on his hands. There is a metaphor in that I'm going to think about for quite a long time, okay? In the end, I don't know, we don't really see how it works out, but Lymond is satisfied that the Somervilles aren't the people that he's after, and he walks out of their house quietly, and you can tell he is so pissed at this point. I think what happens is when Lymond gets pissed, he immediately just sort of internalizes it and goes quiet, like a bomb that's just been set off but we're waiting for the explosion and it's really quiet. And it's actually quite funny. He's returned more cattle and livestock than what he took from them. So I'm assuming he's just been going around to like a whole bunch of farmers and stealing all of their cattle. They've all mixed up and no one knows whose is whose, and he's just been like, CBF returning them to each individual farmer. We'll just put them all here. I feel sorry for those poor farmers who probably needed those livestock a lot more than this rich couple, but anyway. Lymond is not the best person. The last part of this chapter for me was definitely the most eerie that I've read so far, and the most raw with regards to Lymond's emotional state. And this all starts on page 208 with the opening sentence, "During the ride, Lymond made no secret of his mood." Okay, so the bomb has exploded officially, and now it's the fallout and the cleanup. We once again get that my favorite phrase is verbal lash, although it's now just under the lash. And then he actually goes and actually physically whips someone for what seems like not a particularly good reason. It's actually not entirely clear what the reason is. One of his men, Lang Clegg, made a passing comment about maybe I should go into the cattle business. Lymond then thought that was okay to whip him to the point of near unconsciousness, to the point where Will had to leave because he felt like he was gonna hurl. Like, what? I don't know, I don't really understand what the real reason he chose Clegg was, if anyone can share some light on deciphering this, is the top of the page 208. What exactly has Clegg done wrong that pissed Lymond off? Or is the point that he did very little and Lymond was just choosing the closest person who seemed like there was a slight problem? And this was just so tense, how they make camp and Scott is trying to, like, Will is trying to go to sleep, but he can just hear Lymond pacing and pacing, and then next minute Lymond's there saying, get up, I want to talk. And those next 3 pages of them talking, 208, 209 to 211, is such an interesting interaction. So we haven't really seen Lymond and Scott talk much together, except when Scott first joined the crew. I'm sure that they obviously have. But what we find out here is that Scott seems a little bit more sobered up on his philosophy of being a criminal for the sake of being criminal, because he's all quiet regarding Lymond because he doesn't agree with Lymond using a woman. Now, of course, we don't think it's good to use people, but a part of me was thinking, come on, Will, get over yourself. Like, he says here on page 209 that he would rather lose his right hand than do that to a woman. And I'm not sure I entirely believe that, Will. Come on, would you really offer up your right hand, or would you just kind of use a woman? I don't know. I mean, we can see that he didn't use any women in the brothel at the Ostrich Inn, so at least that we saw. At least it was written. So, I mean, obviously he knew Kristen Stewart, and I think it's kind of cute that they grew up together. Very, very cute. The plot thickens. I like that connection. There's definitely going to be something that goes down with these 3, that's for sure. Maybe he likes her. Maybe the whole thing is that, yeah, Will just likes Christian and it's got nothing to do with women. He's just, like, pretending that he's all philosophically high and mighty. And that's the other thing. Lymond is exactly correct in accusing Will of changing his moral stance on things based on what is convenient at the time. Because Will started off saying that he just likes purity, and he's now choosing crime, pure crime, but now he's defending a woman. Like, if he was truly sticking to his crime, wouldn't he be totally happy with using people, including women? So Lymond definitely has a point that it's just like, well, like, the words coming out of your mouth don't really match up with the current words and actions that you're doing. And we as readers know that Lymond did try to tell Christian his identity. And Lymond obviously doesn't say that to Will. I don't think there would have been much point. And it's also fascinating because Johnny told this to Will, because Will and Johnny seem like they're kind of close now. I quite like that. And I wonder if Lymond is actually feeling threatened by the closeness between Johnny and Will, because Will and Lymond are not too different in many ways, and I think Johnny's probably seeing that. And of the 2, Will is probably a lot easier to actually talk and get along with compared to Lymond. By probably, I mean he definitely is. So I wonder if Lymond's feeling a little bit threatened by Johnny's closeness with Will, and especially because Johnny told the whole Christian debacle to Will. Maybe knowing it would have caused a rift, although to be honest, I think Johnny would have just said that and not really thought much of it. I found it so cute how Lymond was just sitting with his back against a tree, fiddling with, like, little pieces of twigs and sticks, looking up at the sky and, like, laughing in exhaustion. And we do see this, and this is like the top of 211. Scott recognised in the other for the first time since he'd known him the extreme outward signs of fatigue. So we now finally see an actual human characteristic of Lymond. It took 211 pages. Congratulations, Dunnett. You've made a human character. Lymond's comment of, by God, what pit of feminine logic have we tumbled across now? This is top of page 210. I was kind of like, screw you, Lymond, for saying that, feminine logic. But it was funny anyway, because He was so true. Will Scott was kind of just being a little bit emotional about things. And Lyman's like, come on. But you know, Will is done with Lyman at this point. He's so exhausted. And when he finally read that letter that George Douglas, so this is George Douglas, not Angus Douglas. So there you go. Is it Angus? Was that the brother? No, Archibald Douglas, who is Earl of Angus. God. So it was George Douglas, who was the younger. And so George thinks that he's got something to lure Lymond in with, but Lymond knows that he has two things, probably a person who is worth 2 wills, or information that he thinks Douglas would want. So he's basically throwing a bone to Will, saying, I'm not going to give you up, right? And then Will goes to sleep, and this is the weirdest part of the chapter and just so creepy, is that Lymond, who less probably than a few hours ago had beaten someone with a whip bloody, now throws a blanket over Will and tucks him in at night. And this is the same character after they've just had like their first domestic. But 100% Will is kind of like, Lymond admits that he thinks that he is a ravished Christian, and after he says this, Scott literally stands up and gets emotional. So I think he does like Christian, and he's kind of probably annoyed at Lymond, if anything, for the fact that it's Christian and not the fact that she's a woman. Of course, you know, Scott's thinking to separate truth from sophistry is beyond him, and it's true that Lymond really does say when Lymond is kind of trying to defend himself, he speaks a lot and throws so many facts in with things that might not necessarily be facts, that it is like getting hit by a machine gun, and some of those pellets might hit but some of them might be Smarties, and you can't really distinguish what's what when it's all coming at you. And Will is definitely a little bit disillusioned with Lymond about how he speaks, but at the same time I was torn between whose side I was on. Not that we need to pick a side, but it was very unclear. I could see both of their points. Lymond being annoyed that Will kind of couldn't understand that it's not why we distinguish between men and women, and also there are probably advantages to working with Christian that could help. I mean, Will obviously doesn't know what Lymond is really trying to do, which doesn't help the situation. I mean, does anyone know what Lymond's trying to do? I assume Johnny. Anyway, this was such a great chapter. The last line of Lymond tucking Will into bed was just super cute / creepy / something is gonna happen that's bad soon. See you next time.